Divine Feminine. Listen closely. If you are here, it is likely because something unfamiliar has begun to stir inside you. The love is still there, undeniable and real, yet the ache that once ruled your days has softened. The yearning that used to pull you back into cycles of waiting, hoping, and excusing no longer has the same grip. Instead, confusion may be setting in. You may find yourself asking why the divine masculine, once protected with every breath, defended against all logic, now feels irritating, disappointing, or strangely misaligned. This can feel frightening, even guilt-inducing. Many interpret this moment as loss, failure, or the death of the connection. But what you are truly facing is not heartbreak. It is the disorientation that comes when illusion begins to dissolve and the heart starts seeing clearly for the first time. In this video, we will help you understand what this shift really means. We will dismantle the fear that tells you something has gone wrong and replace it with truth. You will learn why irritation, emotional distance, and sudden clarity are not signs of rejection or spiritual failure, but signals of awakening authority within yourself. We will explore how this phase marks the end of self-abandonment, the moment when love stops demanding sacrifice and starts requiring self-respect. You will see why dependency fades, not because love disappears, but because your soul no longer agrees to disappear for love. This video will guide you through the collapse of fantasy, so you can recognize the deeper bond that remains when illusion falls away. By the end of this message, you will no longer confuse peace with loss or clarity with coldness. You will understand that what is ending is not the connection, but the version of you who survived by over-giving, over-waiting, and over-believing. This video will shift you from longing to sovereignty, from emotional bondage to grounded truth. You will leave knowing that when love stops hurting, it does not mean love has died. It means you have finally stopped abandoning yourself. And once that happens, everything in the twin flame journey begins to reveal itself as it truly is, not as you once needed it to be. Section 1. The Fall of the Pedestal. There comes a moment when the lens shifts. You stop looking at him through desire and begin to see him through discernment, not with hope, but with realism. Not through memory, nostalgia, or imagined futures, but through present moment awareness. And in that clarity, something sobering happens. You realize that what you are seeing no longer feels right. The image you protected, defended, and elevated can no longer survive the light of truth. This is not because love vanished. Love did not disappear. What ended was the habit of abandoning yourself in order to keep love alive. You stopped shrinking, justifying, and bending your boundaries to preserve a connection that demanded your silence more than your wholeness. When self-betrayal ends, illusion cannot remain. The pedestal collapses quietly but completely. You no longer see him as a hero, a savior, or the missing piece meant to complete you. You begin to understand something deeply uncomfortable yet liberating. You were loving his potential more than his presence. You were attached to who he could become, not who he consistently chose to be. You honored his soul while overlooking his actions. You invested in a future version of him while standing alone with the man he was, right here, right now. As this awareness settles in, your nervous system responds before your mind can explain it. Your heart becomes allergic to what it once tolerated. Inconsistency no longer feels exciting or mysterious. It feels unsafe. Silence no longer feels spiritual or patient. It feels dismissive. Immaturity loses its charm. Excuses lose their power. Running is no longer romantic, it is simply avoidance. What once kept you hoping now leaves you exhausted. You are no longer interested in glamorizing lessons or romanticizing suffering. You are tired of being tested under the disguise of destiny. You are done searching for meaning inside pain that never asked to heal you, only to repeat itself. Something within you has matured past the need to prove endurance through heartbreak. And then, for the first time, you ask the question that changes everything, not from bitterness, but from clarity, not from anger, but from self-respect. Why did I ever accept so little in the name of destiny? That question marks the true beginning, not of loss, but of return, back to yourself. Before we move into the next phase, pause here for a moment. Let what you just heard settle not in your mind, but in your body. Notice what feels tight, what feels clear, what feels unexpectedly calm. This is not about judgment or blame, it is about recognition. Reflection is where real shifts begin. If something in this section mirrored your own experience, honor it instead of rushing past it. I invite you to leave a comment sharing what this realization stirred in you, or if words feel unnecessary, simply type, "I choose clarity over illusion." Your reflection matters. When you acknowledge it, you anchor the shift, and that prepares you for what comes next. Section 2. This is not his change, this is your growth. The masculine did not suddenly change. You did. And that realization can feel unsettling, even frightening, because it forces you to re-examine everything you once believed was solid. When your inner landscape shifts, the past no longer looks the same. You begin to question the signs you followed, the moments you trusted, the love you felt so deeply in your body and soul. You wonder if the connection was ever real, or if you imagined meaning where there was none. You may find yourself asking hard questions. Were you naive for believing so fully? Did you lose precious time waiting, hoping, holding space? Did this journey truly heal you, or did it keep you suspended in a cycle that asked you to shrink, to endure, to stay quiet when your spirit wanted to speak? But divine feminine, this moment is not the collapse of the journey. It is the collapse of illusion. What is falling away is not truth, but the story that once kept you emotionally invested in less than you deserve. You are no longer sustained by breadcrumbs disguised as effort. You are no longer stimulated by the highs and lows of push and pull. You are no longer magnetized by his shadow, his potential, or the version of him that only appeared in fleeting moments. Something deeper has shifted inside you. Your nervous system no longer registers chasing as love. Your heart no longer confuses pain with passion. Your intuition no longer negotiates with avoidance, inconsistency, or emotional stagnation. The part of you that once waited, hoped, and overextended has gone quiet not from defeat, but from wisdom. What you may interpret as dislike, indifference, or even aversion is not bitterness. It is discernment. It is clarity. It is the embodied consciousness you once prayed for when you asked to be free, whole, and self-honoring. This is the moment where growth stops being theoretical and becomes lived truth. You did not lose the connection. You outgrew the version of yourself that needed it to stay the same. Section 3. When maturity replaces fantasy. There is a quiet but irreversible shift that happens when your heart outgrows illusion. You can now see his wounds clearly, without denial or projection, and for the first time, you no longer feel compelled to mother them. His pain no longer activates your instinct to fix, heal, or sacrifice yourself in the name of love. You can feel his fear beneath the surface, but it no longer calls you into rescue mode. You recognize it as his work, his responsibility, his journey. And when you sense his hesitation, his pauses, his delays, his inability to move forward, you no longer wait for it to resolve. You no longer place your life on hold for a potential moment of readiness that may never arrive. This is not coldness. This is maturity. Your heart has moved beyond fantasy, the fantasy that love requires endurance, patience without reciprocity, or endless emotional labor. You are no longer in love with the idea of who he might become one day. You are grounded in who he is choosing to be now, and that clarity changes everything. Because this maturity activates the final stage. When you pull your energy back, something destabilizes in his world. He feels the collapse of the comfort he once had in losing you slowly, safely, without consequence. When you stop chasing, he is no longer distracted by being pursued. He is forced to confront the truth of why he keeps running. When you stop idealizing him, he can no longer hide behind your belief in his potential. He must face himself as he is, without your imagination softening the mirror. For the first time, the dynamic reverses. He does not fear losing your love because love, to him, always felt abstract, forgiving, unconditional. What he fears now is losing access. Access to your presence, your warmth, your devotion. The woman his soul has always been bound to, not because you tried to hold him, but because you finally let go. And understand this clearly. Your dislike is not rejection. It is not punishment. It is not bitterness. It is realignment. You are no longer bending yourself to fit a dynamic that requires your self-abandonment. You are standing where you belong. And from that place, fantasy cannot survive, but truth finally can. Imagine a woman who once kept her phone close at all times, her attention quietly orbiting around whether he would reach out, explain himself, or finally show up differently. She knew his childhood wounds, his fears of abandonment, the reasons behind his silence, and she carried that knowledge like a responsibility. When he pulled away, she leaned in harder. When he hesitated, she waited. In her mind, love meant understanding him deeply enough that he would eventually choose her back. Now picture the same woman after maturity replaces fantasy. Her phone rests on the table, no longer an extension of her nervous system. When days pass without consistency, she does not analyze, excuse, or chase clarity. She simply continues living. When he appears again with half-formed promises or emotional ambiguity, she listens calmly, without urgency, without the old ache. And that calm unsettles him more than any argument ever did. For the first time, he feels the absence of her emotional labor. There is no net beneath his avoidance, no reassurance cushioning his uncertainty. She has not rejected him. She has stepped back into herself. And in that moment, the lesson becomes visible. Maturity does not beg, prove, or wait. It realigns. And that realignment is what finally reveals the truth of the connection to both of them. Section 4. Resistance is self-respect returning. There comes a moment when your soul quietly, firmly, refuses to continue participating in a cycle that once felt impossible to escape. The pattern does not end with drama or collapse. It ends with awareness. What once pulled at your heart now agitates your nervous system. Where there was longing, there is irritation. Where there was desire, there is disappointment. Where you once chased, you now withdraw not out of punishment, but out of clarity. This is not the connection dying. This is you waking up. For a long time, you carried hope as if it were oxygen. You held on to the idea of who he could become, even while who he was continued to wound you. You translated silence into complexity, distance into fear, and inconsistency into timing. You told yourself that if you loved harder, stayed softer, waited longer, he would eventually rise to meet you where you stood. You learned how to rationalize emotional absence. You spiritualized patience. You convinced yourself that endurance was devotion and that your discomfort was simply part of a sacred process. And for a while, that story kept you going. But something has changed. Your heart no longer accepts bare minimum energy dressed up as depth. Your body no longer relaxes around words that are not matched by action. Your spirit no longer feels inspired by explanations that excuse stagnation. What once felt like unconditional love now feels like self-abandonment, and your system will not go back to sleep. This resistance rising within you is not bitterness. It is not anger. It is not punishment or rejection. It is self-respect, returning home after a long exile. It is your intuition stepping back into leadership after years of being overridden. It is your inner voice, steady, grounded, unshakable, finally saying enough without needing justification. You are not closing your heart. You are closing the door to what no longer honors it. And in that quiet refusal, something sacred is restored. Your alignment, your authority, and your right to require more than almost. Section 5. Idealization dies and truth takes its place. One of the most powerful and often most sobering moments in your awakening arrives when the image you created of him quietly dissolves. Not because your love disappeared, not because your heart hardened, but because you can no longer project perfection onto fear and call it devotion. Something in you has matured beyond fantasy, and it will no longer collaborate with illusion. You did not imagine what you felt. You loved the version of him his soul revealed in glimpses, the depth you sensed, the capacity you recognized, the man you knew he could be. That love was real. What has changed is not your capacity to love, but your willingness to confuse potential with presence. Your spirit now insists on honesty, even when honesty costs you the dream you once protected. What once felt mysterious now feels misaligned. The mixed signals that kept you emotionally engaged no longer read as complexity, they read as irresponsibility. The silence you once interpreted as intuitive processing now registers as avoidance. The hesitation you patiently honored no longer feels sacred. It creates space where intimacy should live. The spell breaks, not in anger, but in clarity. This is where awakening deepens. Your soul no longer shields you with illusion. It protects you with truth. It stops filtering reality through hope and starts filtering it through self-respect. You are no longer willing to reinterpret behavior to preserve attachment. You see what is happening as it is, not as it could become, if only you waited longer, loved harder, or believed more faithfully. And with this clarity comes a profound shift. You stop wanting him to change for you. You release the unconscious desire to be the reason someone finally grows. You no longer position yourself as the catalyst, the healer, the patient witness to his evolution. You only want him to change for himself, because anything else would still require you to shrink, to wait, to compromise your truth. If he does not choose that growth, your soul will not negotiate with stagnation. It will not settle for half presence, delayed readiness, or love that lives more in promise than in action. This is not punishment. This is alignment. This is the moment where truth takes its rightful place, not as something harsh or cruel, but as something clean, grounding, and deeply self-honoring. Idealization did not die because love failed. It died because you finally chose to see clearly, and your soul will never unsee. If you have made it this far, pause for a moment and let that land, not in your mind, but in your body. Notice what shifted as you listened. Notice what softened, what tightened, what finally relaxed. This is the place where recognition replaces effort, where truth feels quieter but heavier. You do not need to rush past this. Reflection is part of integration. If any part of your story surfaced while listening, moments you excused, patterns you outgrew, or clarity that arrived without permission, I invite you to share it in the comments. Your voice matters, and your experience may be the mirror someone else needs. And if words feel unnecessary right now, simply type this affirmation below. I choose truth over illusion. Let that be your declaration, your marker, your signal that you are honoring what you now see. Section 6. Emotional exhaustion as awakening. There comes a moment when emotional exhaustion can no longer be ignored, no longer justified, no longer reframed as patience or love. It arrives quietly at first, then all at once. Your heart stops begging for consistency and starts demanding alignment. Your soul reaches a threshold where it refuses to keep burning itself just to keep a connection warm. What once felt like endurance now feels like erosion. This exhaustion is not a failure. It is not weakness. It is awakening. The body and the spirit always recognize the truth before the mind is ready to accept it. What once felt romantic, the waiting, the hoping, the understanding now feels unsustainable. Patience, when it is not met with growth, turns into depletion. Devotion, when it is not reciprocated, turns into self-abandonment. You begin to notice how much energy it costs to remain connected, and how little energy is returned. In this space, discernment is born. Not the sharp, defensive kind, but a steady, grounded clarity. You stop asking how to fix him, how to support him, how to love him into readiness. Instead, a deeper question rises. Does this love support who I am becoming? Does it nourish my nervous system, my future, my sense of self? Or does it keep me stuck in cycles that require my sacrifice to survive? With this awareness, your priorities shift. You choose peace over chaos, not because chaos no longer excites you, but because peace finally feels like home. You choose reciprocity over fantasy, no longer willing to live off potential or promises. You choose alignment over attachment, understanding that connection without alignment is not love, it is endurance. Emotional exhaustion becomes the doorway, not to loss, but to truth, and once you step through it, you do not go back. Section 7. How her dislike awakens him. Something profound shifts when your love remains present, but your tolerance disappears. The emotional landscape changes in a way that cannot be ignored. He once experienced your unconditional love as certainty, as comfort, as safety, as something guaranteed no matter how little effort he offered. It was a soft place to land, a reassurance that required nothing in return. And now, that comfort collapses. You are no longer moved by promises spoken without follow-through. Words no longer soothe you. You require embodiment, consistent action, visible effort, grounded presence. You are no longer impressed by potential or by the idea of who he might become someday. You respond only to what is real, what is lived, what is chosen, again and again. This shift is quiet, but it is absolute, and it shocks him awake. For the first time, he feels urgency where there was once delay. He begins to replay memories he previously dismissed, moments he assumed would always be available. Jealousy surfaces not as possession, but as recognition. He realizes that access to you was never guaranteed, it was granted. And now, it is no longer freely given. Your dislike becomes his mirror. Not rejection, not cruelty, but clarity. It dismantles the ego that believed love could be received without responsibility. It removes the illusion that you would wait forever, that time would bend around his hesitation, that your devotion would outlast his avoidance. In the absence of your tolerance, he is forced to face himself without distraction. Your withdrawal does not destroy the connection. It strips it of fantasy and exposes its truth. In that exposure, something dormant stirs. Purpose awakens not because he is being chased, but because he is finally being met with reality, and reality demands choice. What awakens him is not the loss of love, it is the loss of comfort. And in that loss, he is finally invited to rise. Section 8. The polarity flips. There is a decisive moment when the feminine stops chasing, and the entire energetic dynamic rearranges itself. Polarity shifts not through force, not through manipulation, but through withdrawal from self-sacrifice. The runner can no longer run because there is no one pursuing him. The chaser no longer chases because she has returned to herself. What once felt like an endless cycle suddenly loses momentum, and something unfamiliar takes its place. Stillness. In that stillness, he begins to feel what you once carried alone. He feels the absence of your emotional labor, the unseen effort of holding space, offering understanding, stabilizing the connection when it wavered. He feels the absence of your reassurance, the gentle words and silent patience that once softened his avoidance. He feels the absence of your unconditional presence, the knowing that you were there no matter how inconsistent he became. And for the first time, that absence speaks louder than your love ever did. This is where the polarity truly flips. He begins to move, but not from fear, not from panic, and not from wounded impulse. He begins to chase from truth, from awareness, from the recognition of what was freely given and is no longer available without effort. His movement becomes conscious rather than reactive. He is no longer responding to pursuit, he is responding to loss of access. This shift does not occur because he was punished. You did not withdraw to teach him a lesson or provoke a reaction. It happens because you stopped punishing yourself. You stopped overextending, over-explaining, over-giving in the name of love. You chose alignment over endurance, and that choice changed the entire field. Your healing becomes the catalyst. Your evolution sets a new standard that the connection must rise to or dissolve. You no longer pull him upward, you stand where you belong. And from that place, his awakening is no longer optional. Your growth creates a vacuum that demands truth. Your embodiment of self-respect demands his rise. This is not a power struggle, it is a natural correction. When the feminine returns to herself, polarity restores itself, and what cannot meet you there is revealed clearly, honestly, without illusion. What you experienced was never a failure of love. It was the moment love finally became honest. When the irritation rose, when patience vanished, when something inside you said enough, you assumed the bond was breaking. But what was actually breaking was the version of you who kept shrinking to keep connection alive. That discomfort was not bitterness, It was clarity. That anger was not cruelty. It was truth waking up. You did not become heartless. You became self-honoring. You did not lose softness. You stopped leaking your energy into places that could not meet you. This is the sacred turning point of the divine feminine journey. The moment you stop negotiating your worth, stop explaining your needs, stop surviving on potential instead of presence. You did not reject him. You released the illusion that love requires self-betrayal. And here is what matters most. This shift does not push true union away. It calls it forward. Because real love cannot meet you where you used to be. It can only meet you where you stand now, whole, grounded, and awake. This is not fantasy love anymore. This is not waiting love. This is embodied love, the kind that recognizes you because you finally recognize yourself. So, if this message landed in your body, not just your mind, make a declaration below. Let it be witnessed. Let it be sealed. Comment this exact quote. I did not stop loving him. I stopped abandoning myself. If this resonated, support the channel by liking and sharing this video. It helps this message reach the women who are standing at the same threshold you just crossed. And when you are ready, watch the video below, because this next chapter is not about loss. It is about what becomes possible after you choose yourself. The dislike was never about him. It was about you finally choosing the woman you have become.